With a lost expression, Lu Shang began to bring his hand closer to Zhengyu. Our boy touched her forehead with his finger, and little by little his energy began to enter her body. Upon feeling this, her eyes widened in surprise since she did not know what was happening. Lu Shang's energy entered her body and it began to point out several points across the entire planet, making a map appear. Upon seeing this, her eyes widened in confusion, leaving her in shock. With a serious gaze, Lu Shang revealed that this was the distribution map of all the energy crystals on the blue star. At the bottom were the deposits of the hidden mineral. Zhengyu's attention was fixed on our boy with a surprised expression. She couldn't help but wonder if this map really marked where all the energy crystals were, realizing that there were also mineral deposits. Lu Shang approached her, and while his eyes were shining calmly, with a smile he asked if she could make some additional trips and help him collect as many energy crystals as possible. He promised to reward her by letting her keep a portion of the energy crystals. Upon hearing this, Zhengyu began to ponder in silence. She struck her fist against her palm, bowed before Lu Shang, and with an expression full of determination swore not to betray Lu Shang's trust. Her eyes began to shine with curiosity. For her it was incredible that the blue planet had so many reserves of energy crystals. She did not know how Lu Shang knew this, since even the guide was unaware. With a confident gaze, she thought that if Lu Shang had entrusted her with such an important task, it must mean that he trusted her. With a sincere tone, she decided to set off. Without wasting another second, she jumped and plunged into the sea. Lu Shang began to watch her in silence. His eyes began to shine with calmness. He knew that soon he would leave the blue planet, and by sharing the maps of the energy crystals and of the myth iron, Mytoro and myth silver deposits, he supposed it would benefit the whole planet. With a smile, our boy passed by Snowy and began to whisper. Upon hearing this, her eyes began to shine with love, making her blush like a tomato. Our boy grabbed Snowy by the shoulder, and while his eyes were shining with joy, with a sincere smile he asked her to go first since he was going to catch up later. Not long after, our boy also jumped and plunged into the sea. Snowy put her hands on her chest and began to watch our boy in silence. Snowy's eyes began to shine with love, and she couldn't help but blush, realizing that Lu Shang really was becoming stronger. At the same time, 10,000 meters under the sea, there was Lu Shang. Our boy sat down and began to meditate, causing a powerful wave of martial energy to begin emerging from his body. Our boy extended his hand and energy began to form in it. Lu Shang's attention focused on it and his eyes widened with curiosity. Compared to when he had not yet fought against Lan Chen, his strength had now doubled. The foundation of his advancement toward level 9 was now more solid than ever. If he reached level 9, he felt that his power would transform in a way that even he could not describe. Lu Shang grabbed his wrist, clenched his teeth tightly, and while his eyes were shining, energy began to emerge from his arm. His mental strength and martial body had already fused together. The next step was to infuse them with his martial will and then create a unique imprint of his martial path, a divine form. Lu Shang concentrated all that energy in his hand and clenched his fist tightly. Then he raised his fist, knowing that the true form of his power was about to be revealed. With a serene gaze, Lu Shang extended his hand and began to observe the energy. The path of perfect fullness was the foundation, and the other path served as support. The energy of Lu Shang caused a great hole to appear in the middle of the sea, and not long after, a powerful marine whirlpool began to form. The power of Lu Shang made the whirlpool shoot up into the sky, surrounded by his martial energy. The attention of Cumberland and the other martial saints was fixed on them. Their eyes widened in fear, and their jaws dropped in shock. The marine whirlwind created by Lu Shang reached the clouds. Cumberland began to observe it with a gaze full of fear, and it didn't take long for him to realize that heaven and earth were being dragged by a gigantic force. Realizing that someone was reaching level 9. Upon hearing this, the eyes of the martial saint behind him began to shine with rage. He clenched his teeth tightly, and with a furious gaze asked how it was possible that there was such an expansive energy when breaking through level 9. When he had ascended to the level of martial saint, he had only caused an anomaly within a radius of a few hundred meters. With a surprised gaze, Cumberland began to ponder in silence. With a gaze full of fear, He could not help but wonder if the one ascending to level 9 was Lu Shang. Upon hearing this, the attention of all the martial saints focused on Cumberland, and everyone was paralyzed with fear. Cumberland began to look at the ground, and thought that it was best to clean up this place quickly since they had no right to get involved in these matters. Despite the fact that the martial saints were furious, they let out a sigh and accepted that they, the martial saints, had now become mere elite cleaners. At the same time, Lu Shang closed his eyes and concentrated, making his martial energy become more powerful. Lu Shang stood up and a powerful energy began to emerge from his body. He could feel that it was already here. Lu Shang focused even more and began to channel his energy. At that moment, the figure of a powerful demon appeared. He crossed his arms and began to observe our boy in silence. The energy of Lu Shang began to swirl around him, and upon looking closely, he noticed that the demon had disappeared. His eyes filled with confusion, since he did not know what was happening or where he had failed. He decided not to give up, clenched his fists, and while his eyes were shining with rage and determination, he decided to try again. But not long after, the energy that was emerging from his body disappeared again. Lu Shang's attention fixed on it and his eyes filled with surprise and confusion. He could not believe that he had failed again. With a furious expression, he focused again and decided to try once more. The Saint Lu Shang continued trying tirelessly, and after several hours, our boy collapsed exhausted to the ground. He didn't know why this wasn't working, nor where the mistake was. Lu Shang's face was full of sweat and his eyes of fatigue. He let out a sigh and began to ponder in silence, trying to find the answer. Thinking calmly, Lu Shang's attention fixed on his hand and his eyes widened with fear and surprise. His martial mark, his martial form, everything was built according to his will, and yet it didn't work. The bottom of the sea was full of strange fish prowling around the area. During these days, the Saint Lu Shang had been constantly trying and reflecting. Lu Shang sat back down on the ground, closed his eyes and began to meditate. While a flow of energy was emerging from his body, Lu Shang concentrated even more, having reached the 3rd level of the state of mental void. His mental activity surpassed hundreds of times that of an ordinary person. Lu Shang stood up, clenched his fists, and the image of the strongest opponents he had fought came to his mind. He began to reorganize and analyze everything he had learned, peeling layers like an onion in search of the origin of everything. Lu Shang opened his eyes, which began to shine with a murderous intent. He tightly clenched his fists and began to observe it with a joyful gaze. A smile spread across his face as he had finally understood it. Lu Shang began to imagine his martial path. In his perfect martial path he had included more and more martial paths, and increasingly powerful ones. The original structure could no longer cope. It was already near its limit, when the martial will transformed into a manifestation. That limit was completely broken, not even able to close the circle anymore. Lu Shang began to imagine himself holding a tray full of apples, and then a tray full of heavy watermelons. It was as if a plate that was originally meant to hold apples was now trying to hold watermelons. The apples could be supported by stacking them, but with watermelons the plate might collapse. With a curious gaze, Lu Shang began to look at his hand in silence. If he wanted to ascend to level 9 with the perfect martial path, he had to devise a much more solid and vast structure that could support all those paths that were about to transform. Lu Shang closed one eye and began touching his head with his hand. Deep down, it all came down to his foundations being too superficial, his accumulation not being sufficient, and yet he had an excessive ambition, so he didn't know how he could easily create an unprecedented path in history. Lu Shang focused, and several energies began to emerge from his body. Until now, he had already traveled and counted on the support of 3 level 11 techniques, and with numerous paths of level 7, 8, 9, and 10 as a base, it could be said that everything had flowed without obstacles. Lu Shang began to walk upstairs toward the heaven. Now was when he was really trying to forge his own path, and not just any path but an unparalleled one, conceived to surpass even level 11. Aiming at level 12 and 13, he did not know what to do. Just then, someone asked him to go to the world of dreams. Upon hearing this, Lu Shang's eyes began to shine with rage and confusion, since he didn't know what was happening. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part,